Hey guys, it's Steph from Render Me This, and welcome to the VStitcher Basics course. Today I get to teach you about 3D styling and rendering. 3D styling is the last step you're going to do before rendering. You're going to make sure that your garment is styled. For example, if you have a hoodie, you can choose if you want the hood up or the hood down. Rendering is going to be your last step. That's going to be taking your 3D garment and exporting it into either an image, a JPEG, a PNG, or a turntable, rotating GIF, or a 3D object. Now we're just covering the basics today. I plan to do other videos where we deep dive into more about rendering, but let's dive into our software right now.
So to start out this lesson, we are going to load any garment that you might have on your computer. If you don't have anything downloaded, you can always go to the File and the Import from Cloud, and you can download something from Browzwear Cloud Library. This will load and you can pick from a selection of garments. So I just have one of my garments loaded. It is one of the dresses I've done, and I just did my snapshots button and I loaded a snapshot. Now your snapshot is your avatar plus your pose. So you can see there's a different avatar that now just loaded. I can also get to my snapshots by going to my 3D side under snapshots, and then I can see the different ones I have created. So we'll start with the faceless woman right here, as that's the one that I want to render. It's also capturing her pose, so you can see that her arms are in a T pose. So if I go to one of my other snapshots, her arms are down. Now we are going to go over our styling tools today. When we are doing our styling tools, I can go ahead and hit the Tab key on my keyboard on my 3D side to expand that side of the screen. If I hit Tab again, I'm in split screen, Tab on the 2D, again Tab on the 3D. So using that hotkey, we are able to expand our 3D side. I also won't need any of my materials, so I can hit this little arrow on the far left-hand side to hide that panel if I want an even larger screen. We will need this right side context menu, as when I select my styling tool in the upper right-hand corner right here, you can see that is popped into a styling section. I have my styling tools right here and then my simulation tools right here. So we're going to be using both of those every time we are changing things, pinching, pulling. We are going to click dress to have the simulation move as well. So as I'm scrolling around, as soon as I hit that styling button, I notice that I have this grid over top of part of my garment. That means these pattern pieces are actually locked. So if you ever open your styling tool and you see this kind of white grayish grid, those patterns are locked and I can't move or grab them. We'll get to how we can unlock them in a little bit. You can see this back here. It's not even simulated, but it's locked, and how we can fix that. I do want to go over some main parts of the styling tools though, being pinch, brush, and move. These are your three main tools that you're going to be using depending on what you need to do within styling. Styling is going to be just like in real life if I were to walk up to a mannequin and I were to take my hands and pinch and pull the garment, and we're just going to be doing that in 3D. So the first one I'm working with is pinch. Pinch is going to be just like your hand, and I can click and I can drag and I can release my mouse button, but you see nothing happens. It's kind of holding in place, but what we need to do is click that update 3D button, and you can see it's going to simulate a new drape for that. And I can do that again. Let's do it down here at the hem, taking my pinch, dragging and pulling, and then updating 3D. Again, adding that gravity back in, creating that accurate drape, the physics of the fabric. Within pinch, you have a couple different subcategories. So you have your radius, which is going to be the size of your hand. I can drag that slider, and now you can see I have a large portion that I'm pinching and dragging. And I can continue to pinch and move before clicking that dress button if I wish. And then I also have the effects of the pinch. So I have regular effect and focused. Regular effect is affecting the entire geometry of this garment. So as I'm picking it up and moving it, you can see everything over here is also moving as well. If I were to switch to focused, it's just affecting a much smaller radius. So you can see stopping about right here versus when I was on that regular mode, it was dragging the entire garment. So again, depending on what you're doing, if you just need to, fix like a little strap or, fix the collar, things like that, focus might be better if you're working in a smaller area. But if you need to move, the entire, pant line of something, or the waistband, you need to move that all the way up, using the regular effect may be better for you. Focus is going to be a little easier on your computer, so if you notice your computer is struggling through any of these lessons, just toggle to that focus view and your computer will like it a bit more. Now, while I'm using this pinch tool, I'm currently just having this green selection, but if I don't like using that green selection, I do have the 3D gizmo that I can turn on. So the 3D gizmo is in the upper right hand corner. When I select that, my 3D gizmo appears. Now your 3D gizmo is a very powerful tool. You are able to move things on the different axes. So the first axis being our Y, moving up and down, we can move it that way. We can move it on our X axis, going left and right. And we can also move it on our Z axis, and that's the one that is kind of a little different in 3D if you're not used to 3D, as that is going to be back and forth, so kind of your perception of coming forwards or backwards. And I can use that gizmo to very precisely style something somewhere, clicking that dress update button, and I was able to move it to the side a little bit easier than if I were to just use my hand and drag. And I can still use my hand to drag. When I first click on it, I can still drag without the gizmo appearing. Or you can grab the center, that blue center ball. You just click and drag it. It turns yellow when you click it, and that's going to work the same in having, your free movement there. There's also rotating handles too, so these will rotate in all the different axes as well. That would really only be if something got flipped and you need to unflip it. Again, clicking that dress or finish button. The next tool that we're going to cover is a brush tool. So the brush tool is going to be similar to the pinch tool. We're just able to either grab larger selections or entire pattern pieces. So for larger sections, you're just going to toggle to your brush tool, and then you're going to click and hold down and drag the selection you wish to move. So I'm kind of painting over that area that I want to move. I can then take my arrow and I can move using it that way. If you do not have your 3D gizmo on, you do have to find the green pin. So there's a little green pin every time you create a selection, and that green pin will determine where you can move things. So I recommend definitely having the 3D gizmo on, at least just so that you can grab the center a little bit easier. Within the brush, you also have your radius and your regular or focused effects. Now, a really beneficial part when using the brush tool is using your hotkey of Command or Control. So I can brush that entire pattern piece, or if I hold down Control or Command, depending if you're Mac or PC, when I click on that pattern piece, it auto selects it all. So it's going to be really easy for me to move my hemline up or down without having to, paint around or select the entire pattern. The hotkey is really, really handy for that. Now the last tool next to your brush is going to be Move. So Move is going to be a way of re-simulating your pattern pieces without popping it back into Prepare. So if I go to Move, I can actually select entire pattern pieces, and you can see those blue stitch lines. And if I need to re-simulate it, I can move it wherever I need it to be, and then I can click Dress or Finish. Now you might not be really seeing the use case right now because my garment looks pretty well put together right now and well styled, but let's say my garment actually simulated where this pattern piece was caught in her leg, just like that. So that was my final simulation and I need to fix it. A way to fix it, instead of using your pinch and brush tool and pulling that through the other leg, you could just switch to your Move tool, moving that pattern piece a little more center. This one's a little caught in the leg too, so I might pop that one and that one, and then when I click Dress and Finish, you can see it's no longer caught in the leg. This is great for pockets, collars, any sorts of things that you don't want to re-prepare the whole garment for, but just kind of moving them. Now we do have 3D styling properties within our styling tool. So the properties that we can apply are going to be hold, flatten, and retouch. Up until now, we've just been using our tools naturally, just like we would use our hands in real life. So we're moving something somewhere, we are clicking. Now we do have 3D styling properties within our styling tool. Of those properties, when we select one of our tools, such as pinch or brush, we're able to hold, flatten, or retouch our garment. Up until now, we have just been using these tools a little bit more naturally, just like we would with our hands in real life. So what we are going to do is we are actually going to go against gravity and go against reality and use these tools as if we were to use pins in real life, if we were to use an iron or a steamer in real life, or if we were to, get a little crazy and stretch or shrink this fabric. So using my pinch tool, I'm just selecting a part of this garment. I'm then clicking my hold button. And then now when I click update or dress, you can see that that's staying in place. I'm holding it in place as if I'm freezing it or if I was pinning it. And you can see it is now stuck there. If I want to remove it, I just go back into my pinch tool. I find the little pin right here that's sticking out of my garment. I select it and I hit backspace or delete on my keyboard. I can then click update 3D and it will go back into place. Now if I had a bunch of holds, so I had a hold here, let's drag it here and a hold here, and we'll do one more here. So I have 3 holds. I decide I don't like how that's looking whatsoever. If I go back into my pinch tool, under 3D styling properties, I'm able to select all and then clear, and it's going to delete all 3 that I've made. If I do that though, it will also delete not only the hold, but the flatten and retouch. Any of these properties I've used, it will delete everything. So we've covered the hold is like the pin or freezing something. Flatten is going to be like an iron. If we have a bunch of wrinkles, let's say I want to try and, this one re-simulated back from when I moved it. Let's use our move tool. Just kind of moving that back out of the way to re-simulate. There we go. So let's say, for example, I wanted to flatten out some of these wrinkles here. Because this is like more of a ruching effect, we're not going to flatten it perfectly, but you're going to get to see that some of these, even out a little bit. So if I take my brush tool, I brush over this whole area, and then I click flatten. I don't need to move anything, because just like an iron, if we were to flatten or iron something in real life, we are just pressing it. Think of it as that versus actually, moving around the fabric. I'm going to click update 3D, and you can see that it's pressing. Some of the wrinkles are coming out. Again, this garment is specifically meant to have more of this effect here, but maybe let's try it again on the back here, taking some of these, clicking flatten, and you can see some of the wrinkles are coming out a little bit. Now the other one is going to be retouch, and that is expanding or shrinking our fabric. Note too, as I'm using these tools, each tool is a different color. So hold is blue, flatten is yellow, and then when I do this retouch here, it's going to be red, and the blue turns to purple there once it's not selected. With this retouch tool, if I select an area right here and click retouch, I am able to shrink or stretch this fabric. Keep in mind though that the software does not simulate ripping. So if you go above and beyond what we can do in reality, your garment's just going to look really jagged, like it's exploding. So make sure that you're staying in the 100 range of things when you are shrinking. So let's actually shrink this garment by 20%. So meaning it's now going to be at 80. When I click update or dress, you can see that garment has shrunk down a bit right where I applied it compared to the other one. You can see that has shrunk a bit. Now if I go back into this tool and let's expand it, maybe I'll take this whole section here and retouch. I'm going to stretch this fabric. You can see that this fabric is now super stretched out just in that area that I have selected. Now, this is not true to real life. This is great if you are just playing around with the software, you're making some really fun garments, you're just doing this for visual effects. You can create some really fun stuff. If you are using these tools for accuracy and you want your garment to look true to life, I highly, highly, highly recommend not to touch the 3D styling properties. Every now and then you might use hold to just pin down a collar or fix something here and there, but using the flatten and retouch is not going to be accurate to what our garment is looking like in real life, especially if you plan to make physical versions of this garment. If you're doing anything in production, these are going to give you an inaccurate representation to what your garment is actually looking like. So just a few things to keep in mind when you are working with the styling tools. Now, within our styling tools, we do have a few other things. In this drop down here under Advanced, I am able to see all of my 2D flat patterns and I can see what's locked. I can hide and show different patterns. I can do different visible things. I can change the grid. So starting with the first one, I can see that my center back panels are locked. There is a little lock right here. There's also a lock checkbox right here. Because these are locked, if I go in with my styling tools, I can't do anything. I'm clicking, I'm dragging, and they're not moving. So I'm going to unlock these by unchecking the lock button right here. It looks like they are double layered, so I need to make sure that I'm getting both of them. Let's find my other panel. Back panel, I think right here, and I have one more. These are categorized by layers, so you do just have to keep that in mind. I think it's this one. There we go. So I've unlocked all of them, clicking Update 3D, and you can see I now have the ability to move them. Now you might be thinking to yourself, why would I need to lock these? If you're working in multiple layers, let's say for example, I want to add a ruffle to the front, or I want to add a jacket on top of this dress, I might want to lock this entire dress so that it doesn't move when the rest of the garment that I'm adding is simulating. So you may want to lock it for that purpose. You may be coming across maybe this shoulder strap is being really difficult. So I want to move that, and then once it's simulated in a perfect spot, I might want to take that pattern and I might want to lock it. That way I'm not losing that drape at all. It is looking exactly how I might want it to look. So that's what these front panels, these little bindings right here, are locked so that they do not move. Now you are able to also use some of these tools under here. So there's a lock, which I went over. There's Use in 3D, which is going to completely take it out of the simulation and you'll have to re-simulate it. So if I do Use in 3D, if I were to click Update or Dress, you can see that that back's falling because I've completely removed it. If I then were to click Use in 3D, I need to re-simulate that pattern piece. If you don't want to have to go through the re-simulation process, but you do want to see through the garment, maybe these side panels I want to remove and just see through them, you can uncheck Visible. And what that's going to do is it's going to just make that fabric transparent so I can see through my garment. Maybe if I right click and hide my avatar, I can now see through that garment a bit better. I can recheck Visible, and again unchecking it. So if you're doing some 3D fittings, this is a great tool for that, or just overall kind of getting a good look at your garment. You can also uncheck your stitches and recheck your stitches if you want to see anything going on with those. You're able to change collision as well as your details or your grid. Now your grid is going to be something that really makes your simulation better or worse. In my upper left-hand corner of my 3D window, we have what's called a tension map. This tension map is going to be the stretch of your fabric from the 2D to the 3D side. So if I hover over it, you can see in the 3D it's stretching in the width 9%, so kind of tight there. And in the length it is stretching 0.8%. What I want you to focus though on this grid is going to be the size of these squares. The size of these squares is going to determine if your simulation is smoother or rougher. So just pay attention. Let's do this back panel here since I was already hovering over it. So pay attention to this panel right here. The grid is all about the same. You see some squares. If I were to take this panel and change this grid from 0.8 to 0.4 and then click Update 3D and Dress, I'm going to go back into that tension map and you can see how much smaller this grid is. Now this grid is going to be a smoother simulation, but it's going to be tougher on my computer because you're adding more geometry to your garment and your model. With this, we want to make sure that we're staying in a tolerance range of 0.3 to 1. So depending on how small your pieces are, I'm even just doing 0.4. Your computer is going to not like it when you're going below 0.3. Technically, you could go all the way down to like 0.01, I think, but we don't want to do that. We want to stay between 0.3 and 1. I would say between 0.5 and 0.8 is kind of a sweet spot. So the lower the number, the lower the grid. If I were to take this and increase my grid to 2, making it really large, if I go back into my tension map, you can see how large that grid is. Now I'm going to do this example again, but I'm going to do it on kind of a pattern piece with more gathers so that you can really see the difference here. So going all the way down, let's do this middle pattern piece right here. It's at 0.7. If I were to increase this to 2 and click Dress and Update, you can see how jagged this is, how unsmooth these wrinkles are, because when I pop it into that tension map, those squares are trying to create waves and it just creates jaggedness. So that's why we want to take that pattern, let's drop it down to a 0.5, clicking Update or Dress, and you can see I'm getting a much more natural representation of what those wrinkles are looking like, because again, those squares are smaller, we're able to make a smoother simulation. So you can control the grid from your styling tool right here, but also if you're just in your normal workspace, if you select a pattern piece under draping properties on the right hand side, you also have access to the grid here and to be able to change that. And you do have to change all the pattern pieces individually, or you can shift select and change multiple at once. Couple more things before we jump right into our rendering. I'm going to go ahead and bring my avatar back by right clicking on where I think her head is going to be and doing show avatar. So I now can see her. When we are going to render, we can either render hollow, so we could do without the avatar or with the avatar. And if you are rendering with the avatar, you can change her pose if you want. To change her pose, if you click this drop down under arms down, her current pose, yours might say something different if she's in a different pose or you're using a different avatar. And if I click this drop down, I am able to pick from different poses that are offered, as well as different poses that I may have created. So here is a casual pose. I can select casual and she will start to move. If you notice your computer's going slower, you can turn on this button called fast mode, which is going to drop your garment grid all the way to 1. And then at the very end of simulation, it will bring it back to whatever grid you've set each layer on. So if you want, that does help speed up the simulation process a little bit. From here, when she is in her pose, I could then take my styling tool and I can restyle the garment a little bit if I want to move a few things. It looks like this is caught in her hand. So let's just kind of move our garment around and style. Clicking my update my 3D, clicking finish. And this is a time that I might want to save a snapshot. So usually an auto-generated snapshot will save for you, but creating a manual one is always a good idea. So opening that left panel again, doing 3D snapshots, and then let's just do snapshot 2, clicking OK. So I can always toggle back to different poses without having to do that simulation again. And let's hide that panel. Now a few more things that we can customize. If you go under 3D environment and you go under avatar, you can change your avatar texture here as well. So if I want maybe a purple avatar, I can have a purple avatar. Every avatar is going to have different textures, different poses, different properties about that avatar. So just note that what you're seeing on my screen, you may have something a little bit different. You can also create custom poses with your avatar. I'm thinking about doing a video that goes a little more in depth on that one as well. To create a custom pose though, you just select a pose that you want to start from. So maybe I want to start from this casual pose. I click add pose, and then you see a breakout of a skeleton on your avatar. And any of these bones you are able to move. So they all connect to something different. Well, they all connect to the body, but you're going to get a different result depending on which portion you are grabbing. Let's move just a couple more things here. Move her head a little bit. I definitely recommend using like a reference model image if you're creating poses. That's going to be one of the more accurate ways of making sure, you know, she doesn't look too robotic like mine is right now. She actually looks quite like a robot. You're able to, though, on the right hand side, rename it, pose test, clicking save. And then if I wanted to, I could redress my garment in this pose. I recommend going back to your snapshot, updating that, just making sure your drape looks good. And then I can go to, here's pose test, clicking on it, and it will update to whatever pose I just created. Now, this might not be one I exactly want to render in. I think I'm going to, for this example, go to this pose here because I'm going to do a hollow body render just so that we're seeing the garment. So to move on to rendering, rendering is going to be this little camera icon on the upper right hand side of your computer. When I click the render button, I'm going to get a pop-up window. In this pop-up window, I have a bunch of different properties to work from. So I have image, turntable, and 3D object. Those are the 3 different types of renders I can do. The image is going to be a PNG, a JPEG, any type of flat pixel-based image. Your turntable is going to be either an HTML output or an animated GIF. And your 3D object is going to be pretty straightforward, a 3D object. There are a bunch of different settings within that 3D object that you can export to. Browzwear has a PBR FBX that will encapture all of your maps. So that is one I would recommend looking at if you are exporting a 3D object. But there are also more traditional ones such as your normal Autodesk FBX, your GLTF, your OBJ, and so forth. So we're not going to cover our 3D object exporting or rendering in this lesson, but we are going to take a look at our images and our turntables. Before I go into everything on this left-hand side, keep note that this box right here, what you're seeing in this box or this, another 3D window is exactly what you're going to see when your image is outputted. Now it might be a different quality, but the angle that you're seeing, the closeness of the zoom that you're seeing, that is going to be what is rendered. So if you do want to create something custom that's not preset, you do want to kind of zoom in, finding that position of your garment that you want. Once I do that, underneath image, I have different types of renders. I have a normal render, I have a ray trace render, and I have a schematic render. A normal render is going to be very similar to what you're seeing in your 3D window right now. That doesn't encompass any type of special render engines or lighting or things like that. It's pretty much what you see is what you get. Now, the ray trace render is going to be a high quality render. That's going to really calculate the lighting environment that you're in. It's going to make your shadows have more depth. It's going to make your materials look nicer. It's going to take some of the maps that you might not be seeing and make those come to light. So that is going to be your high quality render. This will take more computer power, especially if you're rendering locally. If you have a cloud render service, Browzwear offers cloud rendering at a fee. You can do that in the cloud to take some of that weight off your machine. The last one is a schematic render, and that's going to be more similar to a stylized flat. That is just a black and white outline. It may have some of your fabric texturing as well, but it is really just more of an outline or a silhouette of your garment. It's not super high detailed. Again, think a little bit more as a stylized sketch. Now, for this moment, I'm just going to show us our normal render and how we can do that. So I'm keeping my normal render selected because that's going to be the quickest and the least amount of work on my computer. I can choose to include or uninclude my avatar right here. And then I'm able to change my background too. Currently it's transparent. If you have it set as transparent, it will export as a PNG. If I select that and do a solid color, it will export as a JPEG with a solid color in the background. Or if you do environment, that is going to be the environment of your lighting and background. I'm going to do transparent to have a PNG. Under image size and print size, I'm able to change those. So maybe I want an 8.5 by 11. I'm able to change that. And I can also change the DPI, which to right now I'm going to leave at 300. Under colorways, if I had multiple colorways, I would be able to create multiple renders of those colorways. So I could just select both of them, and then it's going to give me renders of them both. Now, I don't know that I updated the simulation of that colorway, so we'll just uncheck that for now, and I'll show another example shortly of the colorways. So I'm just going to do the plain black one right now, no avatar. And under my 3D views, I can see that I just have my current view right here. So the current view is just the one that I have created navigating this 3D window. If I wanted, there are preset front, left, back, right, top, and bottom views. Those all correlate to these ponytail girls in the upper right hand corner. The 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 are ones that I've created for custom things. So I'm just going to do also a front, and let's do a back view. So 3 different renders, 3 different images. If I click that render button, it can say where do I want these downloaded. I'll just do it to my downloads, clicking save, and then they show up right in my downloads right here. So these are just the PNGs. Oops, let me go back. Let's do the back of the corset. And you can see, like I said, it's what you see is what you get. I can see some artifacts coming in a little bit on the edges, but it looks pretty similar to what my 3D window looks like. So keep in mind, it's nothing too crazy, but you are still getting, a decently accurate representation of what your 3D garment is. I've now updated my garment so that I have a couple colorways in here. My colorways is right up here. I dropped down. I had that plain black one I was working with, and then here's a floral print one. I want to show you quickly just how to make another colorway if you want to. I want to go into a much larger lesson in this, as there's a lot of other things you can do in the colorway workspace. But in case you want to create a couple of your garments and then render out those colorways, I'll show a very quick and easy way how we can do so. So if I'm selected on my plain black colorway right here, my colorway workspace in the upper left hand corner, from home to colorways, toggling that, I kind of get a PLM or like spreadsheet bomb, look of everything going on here. If I click that refresh button, it's going to give me an update of these colorways. Now I have a lot of unused materials going on here, so I can clean up this workspace by clicking this drop down and doing delete all unused materials, and it's going to clean up to the ones only in use. Now if I take my plain black colorway and I click the clone button, it's going to create a duplicate, so I can see plain 1. These color chips are color chips in use, so if I hover over the black, I can see that black is being used in everything that has a yellow checkbox. If I go over white, you can see white and so forth. Now, a really easy way to recolor things is in this workspace, just selecting a color chip such as pink and dragging it and dropping it over top of black. I'm just going to click refresh, and it's now going to update everything that was black now to pink. I'm going to double click, rename that one pink, and let's do one more. Let's make this one blue. So drag and drop the blue over the pink, click this refresh button, seeing that that updated to blue, and let's retitle this by double clicking and doing blue. Now, like I said, there's a ton of other things in this workspace we're not going to cover right now. I just want to show you a quick way to recolor, excuse me, just so that we can do some renders of these. So I'm going to click my drop down of my workspace, going back to home, and I just see my blue colorway. If you're in this workspace and want to view your other ones, just click this drop down of the colorways and you can toggle between your different garments. Now, I want to render these colorways, so I'm going to go back to that render button of this camera. I can see my box here, and I can see that it's remembered my settings. So it remembered that I did an 8.5 by 11 at a 300 dpi. I had no avatar, and I did a normal render on a transparent background. So whatever your last settings is what your computer is going to show you. So maybe I want to render the pink and the blue colorway. I can select both of these. Maybe I only want the current view. And if I click render, and let's just put this in my downloads again. Let's do test, clicking save. I'm going to get two separate images. I'm going to get a blue image and I'm going to get a pink image. So two individual images. I could then take these and I could put them into a PowerPoint or wherever I want to show them, my portfolio, but they are two separate ones. Let's say though I want to render all of my colorways in one image. I can do that by clicking this select all button and then multi-pack combined into a single file. It's going to take a few moments, but it's going to load all four of your colorways into this 3D window that you're viewing. Now, we do want to be able to adjust and move these colorways, and to do that I have to use this global positioning. So I need to change the X, the Y, and the Z values to show exactly how I would like it to in real life. So if I change the X maybe down to 15, they're going to get closer. If I change the Z to 10, they're going to stagger on the Z plane a little more. If I change the Y to 5, you can see that they're staggering on the Y plane. And you're going to just change this how you would like it. So if you just want them side by side in a row, just change your positioning based on that. I'm also going to change my print size. Let's do 11 by 8.5, just so that it's more of a horizontal view showing in my workspace here. Maybe I also want a back image of all four of these put together. I can select my current and my back. I can click that render button, and let's just put this in the downloads again. And I can see very quickly that there is my image that is rendered. And I can see all four of my colorways there. And I can see all four of my colorways here. So really handy way that is going to be rendering our images. The last section that we're going to talk about in rendering for now is going to be our animated GIF. So if you want to see your garment rotating 360 degrees and you want to show someone that without having to open the software, doing an animated GIF is a great use case. So we can do the render button again, and this time instead of images we're going to switch to turntable. Under turntable we are going to check animated GIF. With this we're still just going to do the normal render. I'm going to not do my avatar and I'm going to keep it transparent. Under file size though, I'm going to do custom. For this turntable size, I'm going to do 2000 by 2000. I'm also going to change the FPS, the frame rates per second, all the way up to 30, finding the view, and then I'm going to select the render button. Now this is going to take a bit longer to render because it's going to take a little more computer power. So you can see it's doing the frame rates as it is rotating, and I can see the process bar on the bottom here. Now note, with these GIFs, I'm not able to necessarily start and stop them. They're just going to be completely continuously spinning around and around. But again, this is a great way to be able to show someone your work without having to open the software, without having them to have the software, and it is going to be great. So I'm going to give it here a few moments to finish rendering, and then we'll take a look and see what it looks like. You can see now that my render task is running in the background, and when it is done, it will show up in my folder. On my screen, you can see that my GIF has rendered, and I now have the rotating animated GIF so that I can show others. They get a 360 of what the garment looks like, so the end result there. So that's another great example of rendering your garments. Now I want to note that I am currently only rendering through Browzwear. When you are dabbling in 3D a lot more, you are able to do a million different things with your renders. You can export it as a 3D object and import it into a variety of different render engines and softwares. You can put your asset in a 3D scene. Maybe you want a mini mock store display, or you just want a really cool ecosystem that your garment's living in. Maybe you just want to do something really artistic and you want to have that dress with around a bunch of plants. You're able to do anything you can think of, honestly, when it comes to 3D. So this is just a very basic, high-level way to get your assets out of the software and into either a PNG, JPEG, or GIF format. So just the initial steps there. This is just a basic intro course, but keep in mind there is a ton of different things that you can do, and I hope to get to those in future videos.
Great job today, guys. That's the last of our 4-part series of the Browzwear VStitcher Basics course. It's been an overwhelming amount of support that you guys have been watching and listening and commenting. Please continue to give me feedback and let me know about other topics that you would like to see me do. Until then, see you later.